Welcome to History Makers, the series that goes behind the scenes of the 1992 Premiership season. On today's podcast, Craig Turley, Brett Heady, Dean Kemp, who will join us, and the cork in the ocean himself, Peter Wilson. Gentlemen, welcome. You've come off last night's reunion Premiership dinner. What was that like?
Dominated by Tim Jep, Titan, and I can say that he lost his way multiple times. He's a storyteller that forgets to finish one story, but it was great to catch up.
Yeah, I'd say we're at the early stages of the recovery process, but working into day two, and we'll get better as the day progresses, I'm sure.
A lot of laughter last night. I mean, at any stage throughout the night, all you did was look around and there was blokes cracking right up, you know. So, but Willow was right, you know. Jeppy did all the interviews and had to keep, reminding himself, you know, what he'd asked in the first place, and he'd lost his memory about again? 4 times.
A few. What were the questions?
What was the question?
That's right. But it's always great to connect. It's great to see everyone, and obviously we toasted. Missing friends, absent friends. We toasted Maney and we toasted Roo, and we saw Roo on the big screen, and unfortunately Woosha couldn't be there because of his illness. It was awesome to see everyone that was there, and we look forward to catching up with all over the next couple of days.
So you've got the lunch today, and then you've got the game tomorrow in which you'll be presented to the crowd. How exciting will that be for you?
Well, I don't know about the being presented part, you know. Willow's not too keen on that, but I quite enjoy, you know, getting out on the ground and waving to a few people. And
that's right.
You've always liked the limelight, haven't you? I mean, honestly.
Oh, says the bloke that wore yellow boots for how many years? At least mine were always black boots, Will.
Yes, we're accustomed.
Just got to remember they were sponsored too.
Yeah, that's right.
Was that a Brownlow ploy? I've never asked you that.
Don't do anything for free.
I think he was trying to get Brownlow votes, wasn't he, by wearing those yellow boots? Because at least every time he got it.
Speaking of Brownlow votes, right on cue.
Oh, there he is.
Very hard to get Brownlow votes when you're tearing an umpire a new one.
We're joined by 1992 club champion Dean Kemp. Tommy, just asking the guys about last night. How'd you pull up?
Oh, perfect. Wonderful. Buddy, probably best on ground again, was I, Willow? Oh, that guy's pretty good.
You're on fire.
Very consistent.
Just very good to see all the boys and see all the old smiling faces, and lots of fun.
Well, reminiscing on 1992, gentlemen, looking back to 1991, the end of 91, Craig, you had a fantastic season that 91 year. Going into 92, what was the feeling amongst the group? What did you need to do to get better to take that next step, did you think?
Well, collectively we had a great year in 1991. I think we set a record for consecutive game wins in the competition that year. I think we won 12 on the trot. So, you know, and we got to the final step, and we just got pipped by the best team of the previous decade, and we knew that we had it in us to take the next step, and we knew we needed to do the work again and earn the right. So we believed that we could go all the way.
Yeah, I think we were definitely the best team in 91. We beat Hawthorn at their home ground in about round 7 or 8 by 80-odd points and absolutely smashed them, but we just peaked at the wrong time. You know, I think we peaked too early that year, didn't we? And
I don't think the ground helped either, did it? I mean, going out and playing a grand final at Waverley, I mean, honestly, it was Arctic Park, it's freezing cold, ugliest ground in Australia. And, you know, if we'd probably played at the MCG, I think the outcome might have been different, but we were limping towards the end. I mean, we had a lot of travel, and bodies were, you know, I don't know what you guys are like, but I was having injection after injection just to get on the ground. So it was a long season, and you know.
It was the wear and tear, wasn't it? The travel in the end, week after week on the road, and you know, it was amazing really to keep sort of getting up and producing game after game, and just had to break sooner or later, I think.
So we knew we were good enough because we had a side that was quite young, didn't we? You know, so we knew that if we put the work in, we were going to improve. But I don't think we started 92 very well at all, did we? Weren't we like
No.
2 wins and 1 draw and 4 losses or something from the first 6 or 7 games, and we didn't even finish on top, did we? Like we had the previous year. I think we finished 4th or 5th. So it didn't all go our way, but you know, all things considered, we thought we were going to get better.
But we kept taking the steps. In 91, we kept taking the steps. You know, we won our first prelim and then earned the right for the first grand final. And really, we're only a quarter off against the Hawks.
92 was a tough year. You know, I mean, you were battling hamstrings and Injuries were abound. I missed the first 8 through. I popped my shoulder early, and
Yeah.
a lot of guys were on the, in and out of the side with injuries. David Hart,
That's it.
Juice snapped his hammy a couple of times, and
I know, you look back at that, don't you? You think, all those injuries, and we had, blokes like Billy Sutherland and Davey Jones and that helping us and getting players up every week, all the work they did down at Selby Street, and you think, incredible, really, like the amount of work that went into it.
Well, that's it, and it was all manual. It was all manual work. Tell me, it wasn't like ice butters before the days of ice bars and.
Nothing better than having a corky and getting Billy to rub it out, eh? Yeah, that was, you'd start biting on the pillows. And
So 10th after 7 rounds, which was tough. Don Pike gave us his opinion on that start to the season. Have a listen.
My recollection is we sort of had a bit of a chopping and changing. I think Mick was looking for some new pieces of that puzzle and introduce some new guys. We had some injuries on top of that as well. So my recollection is probably in that first 6 or 7 rounds we didn't probably get as settled a side as we had at the end of 91. And as often happens, post a really strong year where you go deep into the finals, you sort of end up with some changes and some guys who have probably played later in that season who are a bit sorer than otherwise. So
What do you reckon? Is he spot on there, Kempy?
Yeah, I think he's pretty close to it. Yeah, he. And injuries are a funny thing. And the funny thing is, when for any club to have success, you've got to have a good run with injuries. And really, we were battling, so not like a perfect run with injuries. But in the end, it sort of came together, obviously, towards the back end of the season. But definitely early on, we were up against it with the injury side of things.
we're just scrapping to get through. And I know it was like, and it wasn't a great feeling, because even on the training track, I mean, being in a rehab mode that, all you do is swim and run, and, you're not getting out and doing any physical work. And you can see the frustration actually on the training park, and some of the commentary, it wasn't all happy families.
But that's what made training so good, I reckon, Will, because then it was so competitive.
Yeah,
like
it
when
was
we
pretty hard.
trained,
There's no doubt about that.
Our competition at training, wasn't it? It was like game.
Even the warm-ups.
There was fights and blues and sort of good nature, but it was competitive, and it was angry, and everyone wanted to spot, and there was people pushing, and
we pushed ourselves,
it
each
was
other.
an amazing time for that, I reckon. I mean, I'm not sure what it's like nowadays with the training side of things, but when we trained, it was like a game, wasn't it? It was like you wanted to beat your teammate whoever you're on, and to make sure you got in the team for the week.
So you talk about 92. I think there was a bit of a defining game against the Western Bulldogs at Subi. I think a lot of guys had missed a lot of footy. We'd lost 3 or 4 already up to about round 7, and I think they were on top of the ladder, either undefeated or they'd only lost 1. We had a lot of blokes coming back from injury, and we ended up absolutely smashing them by about 70 or 80 point, and I think that...
Are you talking about this game because you jumped up, that was your first game back and you kicked 6 or 7?
Did you get 5?
Is that what you're talking yourself up, are you?
Because I can't remember that game.
I had missed 3 games and came back and kicked 7, but, just a lazy 7.
Handed off another half a dozen.
There was 4 or 5 assists as well, Craig, so I could have had 11 or 12.
I think you're a little bit like Kevin Bartlett at times. I didn't see too many handballs coming from there. Don't you start.
He took the responsibility.
You've seen his hands. You've seen
anything inside 7 is fair game.
He took the responsibility on himself, Wilbur.
That was the rule, though, Tills, wasn't it? Anything inside 70, and if there was less than 2 blokes hanging off you, you had a shot.
Go for it.
That's why they paid you the big bucks, Jobby.
So if you're going to wrap yourself up,
35,000 a year.
I came back against Adelaide, round 8.
4 goals.
And I kicked 4, but I was playing on the weed. So
so you're going to divide that by 2.
Yeah, Wiedemann does give you a fair bit of room.
Before his time with that mullet, because they're back in vogue now, aren't they? So the Weed was running one back then, wasn't he?
We did have the...
They were never
a good one.
That was the ugliest mullet of all time.
The experts, well, the so-called experts, a lot of them from Victoria, thought that the side was actually a little bit physically vulnerable. Was that something that was ever absorbed by the team and thought, we'll show them?
I mean, numerous times I've sort of had to look after Woosher and that out there, didn't I? So, I mean, but you become accustomed to it,
Yeah. I mean, it was a big load for you to look after Willow and Boris, Carl Langman.
The back line, no one wants to pick anyone up, so you've got to do that as well, but what are you going to do?
I think they're kidding themselves if they thought we were vulnerable physically. I mean, we had some enforcers out there, and I had the great pleasure of watching the whole game from start to finish in the grand final the other day, and oh my Lord, some of our boys, went out of their way to hit blokes. And that was always the way, wasn't it? If we were down and we were, 3 or 4 goals down in the third quarter, there'd always be somebody starting to fight or, hitting somebody and, legally, of course. You'd never hit anybody illegally, but it was...
but for the team on it, just to inspire the team to get the boys back on track and go, right, okay.
And everyone said, right, we're back in this.
But Michael had always made that very much a point. That if you weren't dominating a game and if you weren't getting a lot of ball,
get involved.
You had to make a mark on the game. And that just had to be, if you took someone out, you took someone out. But just to get yourself in the game, you had to take that step. And I don't think we were shy on taking a forward step on making sure the game was physical.
Yeah. What about, sorry Craig, about the personality balance amongst the team? Was that a crucial, there was a lot of characters and I suppose a few pranksters as well that were part of this squad. How important was that, having that balance?
We had some funny guys. I mean, Guy McKenna honestly thinks he's the president.
Funny. He thinks he's funny. That's the funny part about it, Will.
He actually does. He thinks he's the president of Ukraine. He's an ex-comedian.
So Bluey's favourite trick was going to all the lockers while we were out on the ground training, and he'd get the deep heat and he'd rub it into your jocks, so you'd go and have your shower and you'd be sort of drive.
That was funny.
You drive home on the freeway and you get to about Hutton Street and you're like, you're just starting to twitch up a bit,
But we had a great diversity of characters, and as Tommy said earlier, we worked really hard. We're really competitive with each other and with ourselves, and just going back to that perception of the Victorians, it was early days for us. We're only a few years in, and we were still learning and we were still developing. I remember when Wilbur came back from Victoria, and he already had 3 or 4 or 5 years in the system then, so he was more physically developed and whatnot, and we were still developing as a group, and the sports science was still developing, so that perception of the Victorians was probably fair. We were probably a bit light on, but we knew that we could match them physically. I remember, I'm sure they don't do these exercises anymore, but you remember that exercise we used to do with Mick, where we'd just stand in a circle and he'd just call a couple of names, and it'd just be like wrestle, fight.
For leather.
Every now and again there'd be a ball or not thrown into the mix, and I remember I had to line up against Wilbur every time and was being tested, and he had a few years on me and a few physical development years too, and it was always bloody hard work, and we did the hard work to develop physically, and we knew we could match them in all areas of the game.
And he wouldn't allow us to have any shortcuts, would he? When you think about it, Moldhouse, he didn't. We all did the work, and it was the only way you were going to get a game. Like you had to go through that, and you knew the training days coming up, the tough ones, and you knew it was going to be on. It was like preparing for a mini game. Like right, I get through this session, and we've got to perform, and hopefully I'm there on the weekend.
You talk about different personalities. I mean, that was the whole beauty of the team, really. I mean, we didn't have anyone that really strayed too far outside team rules, did we? And if they did, they got pulled into line pretty quick, we had guys like Michael Brennan that weren't scared to say what they thought, and you knew that, if you got too far out, I mean, you still blatantly went outside the rules, many times and got your ass kicked for it, but...
Me or Willow?
I tell you,
but you had Nezzy's back, Nezzy just let you do anything, didn't he, really? Yeah.
The greatest example of that would have been Don Pike. So when Mick first arrived at the club, Pikey was a forward pocket goal kicking genius from the handbag carrying Claremont side, and they
had to help himself.
What were you going to say? The blue blood central?
No, let's not get confused. But no one, So Mick really pulled it. So Don nearly left. Don nearly walked out.
Yeah, the crossroads, wasn't he?
He did.
Yeah,
he didn't come to training for 2 months, one pre-season.
Sir Donald has a very, very...
he's a strong character, isn't he?
He's got a very strong character and very articulated as our Don. And he gave Michael a verbal stoush, which was fantastic to listen to. I do think he was mad.
But unheard of, like nobody ever spoke back, did they? But Pikey says, why am I going to come to training if you're not going to play me?
But isn't that amazing, to show the characteristics of Pikey and the, professionalism? He took this, he had that break for a few weeks, whatever it was, but to his credit, he come back and then he became like probably the premier bloody tagger in the league. Used to beat Buddha, all these guys week in, week out, and was so disciplined.
But got so much of the football at the same time.
And he was hard, like used to terrorise him. He just absolutely drive him mad, so amazing effort.
Well, you mentioned Bluey. He actually had an interesting little quote from our interview with him. Take a listen.
My first year, I reckon, I came out of Claremont on a massive $8,000 contract as a 15 or 16-year-old, signed up on the West Coast for $45,000. So all of a sudden, cars, and I loved Hondas. Well, I actually loved a Volvo, but that probably is too expensive. So I came halfway, got a Honda. And very first night, parked it, beautiful shiny red one, because I reckon they go quicker. Parked in at Subi, walked in, hey boys, come have a look at my car. And I wasn't a huge car enthusiast, but I just moved up from a Holden Barina up into this Honda Integra, a two-door red, sharp, sporty looking thing. Parked it in a car park, just where everyone parks, under light, all that sort of stuff. No problems. In you go. There you go, property man. There's my keys. Away we go. Went out and trained, did our weights like we used to do. So 3 or 4 hours have gone. Go to get my keys, thanks Hank, and walked out. And in the middle of the car park where I thought I'd parked it, the car wasn't there. So I walked up one side and walked again. I'm thinking, I'm sure I parked there. Then went to my other spot. If I was a bit late, no, it wasn't there. And if I was a bit early, no, it wasn't there. Came back inside. And just as I came back inside, Trevor Nisbet sort of barged out of his footy office and just said, hey, boys, and the weights room was sort of open and a few blokes were still in there. He said, hey, boys, if anyone has unlocked their car or left their window down, just be careful because there's been some young fellas hanging around, loitering around the cars in the car park. And I sort of heard it, but just sort of didn't recognise, and then sort of walked in and said to the property man, you haven't seen my car or anyone's moved my car? And no, all that sort of stuff. And then it sort of dawned on me what Nizzy just said, don't tell me my car's been stolen, has it? Because it was the day I picked it up, no insurance, didn't even know what car insurance was. Not that the people that had stolen it would have known that either. And there I was standing in the car park and I literally just turned white. What do I do? And straight into Nizzy. And he's, mate, I literally have parked my car like 3 spaces down there and it's not there anymore. What do I do? And he's sure. Another 10 minutes, we went looking for it. Well, straight across from the change rooms and the car park is this dirty, great big willow tree, and it's underneath it. You could clearly park a Honda Integra quite easily, and sit there in this pitch black. Could not see it you literally had to be a foot away before you could recognise the car was there. Anyway, I was pacing up. It would have been 40 odd minutes until someone came clean and said, Bluey, you want to go check that tree out over there? What? And so obviously a player who I later found out was Johnny Anea taught me that little trick. Yes, Brett Heady down the track comes to the club, gets a new set of wheels. He was fairly passionate about his vehicle, so I thought, brilliant, guess what I'm doing? I'm grabbing your keys, mate, and I'm going to get off training early and I'm going to park it straight under that willow tree like someone did to me 5 or 6 years ago, and you're going to cop this. And so sure enough, it was a bit of enjoyment getting my own back on Brett Heady, unfortunately.
That wasn't me, that was you. That was... Yeah, so...
I was on $15,000 a year. How would I afford a new car? What are you talking about?
Brand new Toyota Celica. GT4 Turbo it was, a brand new red one, a Celica, and Tommy went and grabbed... Bluey grabbed Tommy's keys, and so we were at Subiaco Oval, weren't we? And he parked it around the back of the 3-tier stand. And I'll never forget your face when you came out the back of the change rooms that day. I've never seen you, buddy, so emotional. Like, I haven't even got insurance yet. What happened? It was just the biggest carry-on of all time. And
I had to put a show on for everyone. That was the whole part of it. Bluey and I set it up. That's what it was about,
Yeah, of course it was. You ever seen a grown man cry? That was the day.
Growing man.
What about the infamous review nights? Do you guys remember them very well, and some of the dress-ups? And
I don't remember them at all. They were...
I remember the one I did with Big Spider Burton, and I was a puppet and I sat on his knee and we sung some song.
I can remember one.
You were Kermit the Frog, were you?
You were.
Yeah. Why are there so many...
What was the one we did down at Fremantle?
At the passenger terminal.
And Craig McGrath, remember Yabby?
Yeah.
He came over and said, look, when he was with Fitzroy, that he'd done this stint. And we've gone, oh, yeah. He's called It's the Hat Dance. We've gone,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
what's the hat dance? Anyway, we were basically naked outside
I hope someone put it over.
brown tape over our...
I'm going to need a Cobra. I'm going to need a real big one over here.
Don't be bringing a little cap in for me, mate. I'm going to need something real solid.
It basically was soft porn.
But it was a lot of fun. And, you know, we used to, obviously we rehearsed very seriously for months on end.
Half an hour beforehand.
To get our performance right. But it was fun, and it was another way in which we kind of developed and deepened our relationships with each other, because we could do that stuff, which was a release too, because we were always kind of on and focused. And
the problem for the club though was that the bigger and bigger it got, there was more and more people coming, and we had 5,000 and 10,000 people there. The boys had to get more and more drunk to get up there and perform, you know, which wasn't a good thing during the season. It was like, if I'm going out there, I'm going to be well and truly on my way, wasn't I? You know, there's no. Yeah, I did a Kevin Bloody Wilson thing. There was that much swearing going on, and my nana was in the crowd, and she said, Brett, you know.
But you'd never do that normally, would you? And it was just because of the group we had together and the safety we felt, you know, within that group to go, okay, I'm going to make an idiot of myself and we'll do it, you know. But normally you wouldn't do anything like that.
But there was some breaking entertainment. There was the world premiere of the Venus flytrap, and
that was big. That was big, wasn't it? Boris.
Boris was going to retire, wasn't he? He said, "This is it. This is the one thing that's going to work."
So you need to get some footage.
No, we do.
Of the Venus flytrap?
$44 revenue he got. 17 years he did it. He got $44 back, he reckons.
covered the trailer registration.
When we had the Wembley Hotel, Carl had these little side lurks going on, and he's rolled up with his Venus flytrap and put it in the beer garden out the front.
You would have been happy with that. Well,
and I'm just going, mate, how's this going to work, mate? I said, honestly, people are going to have a few drinks. We're going to have broken arms, broken legs. I said, I'm the licensee. I'll be in jail. And he's going, don't worry about it, don't worry. And off he'd go, and he'd be on his bourbons, and he'd be running from one end to the other.
He'd charging through the hotel.
And hitting the screen. Bang! And he thinks it's hilarious, right? And then the next day we've got carpet burns on our faces from hitting this. You know, you roll up and Moldhouse would say to us, "You two been fighting?" Why? We got all these grazes on our faces. Unbelievable.
Boris was always a man for ideas, wasn't he? Yeah, always had a million ideas. Yeah.
Very entrepreneurial.
You started to get on a bit of a roll that second half of the season, and your momentum and your confidence was building. But Craig, there was a pretty nasty incident in round 15 against Essendon, an injury. Can you recall what happened there?
Well, you're obviously referring to the ruptured scrotum.
Yes.
That's come good, Turls, hasn't it?
I'm thinking, where is this going?
Come good. Oh, there might be a little bit of scar tissue, Tommy.
Still a bit of
might be a little bit of scar
tissue. Is there any swelling or not?
Well, from time to time, less often there used to be.
It was brilliant because it put Turls out of the nightclub scene for about 4 weeks, and we finally got a bird to look at us.
I didn't miss a game with that injury, but it was in the West Australian with that technical term alongside the injury, in doubt with ruptured scrotum. But and I'm not sure if they get away with it these days, but so it was Dean Wallace, and he was a mongrel. He was a good player, hard player, premiership player. But
what did he do? You just get hold of him and give him a good tweak or something?
It was 150 metres off the ball, and obviously it was under instruction. So basically he just walked up to me and grabbed my shoulders and drove his substantial thigh knee into my groin, and it's the only time in my whole waffle AFL career that I actually went off voluntarily because I couldn't physically move and I needed to go off and vomit, and so I just hobbled off. Basically, just drove his knee into my nurries and folded me over.
Yeah, that's shocking stuff, isn't it?
You were quite the sex symbol back in the early 90s. You're a very, very popular
interesting player. Segue.
Yeah. Peter!
That was the end of it.
He still is, Tyson. Look at the big fella.
Absolutely.
He goes really well to retirement villages.
Yeah, exactly.
The masks that were made for Craig Turley, I think there was about 10,000 that was supposed to be made for a game. What happened there? They never surfaced in the end.
No, it was at 96 FM. I was in the marketing department at the footy club and also doing some work with 96, and we'd spoken about it and we'd seen it before in the NFL. And they came up with the Craig Turley mask, and it was run through the marketing department. It was all go. It was all part of the 96 FM sponsorship agreement, and it was done. Of course, Turles was on side, and
I don't think I knew about it.
yeah,
That's why you're on side.
that's why you're on side.
I didn't get a 50-cent bloody commission for each month.
should have said Turles didn't have a problem with it.
Don't worry,
That's 'cause you didn't know about
there
it.
was some fun.
I don't recall.
Anyway, the only problem with the marketing division, Ross Nicholas was the marketing manager. We just didn't pass it by Mickey Moldhouse, and of course Mick ran the club. We just didn't know. But
Was he a big rap for the mask?
Oh, and when we've gone, well, what's the problem, Michael? And he's gone, Craig won't be able to handle this attention.
No, he was right. He was right.
Sex symbol, split scrotum, and a mask. Not a bad career.
But that was, it was a brilliant marketing idea by Willow and his cronies. But that was our first home final. So that was the first final that we'd earned the right to host, the qualifying final against Hawthorn at home. Unfortunately, it didn't go ahead, and obviously all of us had enough to focus on and think about. But as it happened, those, even though they didn't get distributed on the day, they still haunted me for decades, Tyson. I remember there was a box of them that they'd be distributed at the Royal Show, and then I remember I was living in a share house in Scarborough, and I think you guys probably came around for a party or two there over the years, but my mates would find them and stick them up in spots where they'd just appear, and it was a little bit disturbing, and it haunted me for years.
I imagine Mick having a problem with that though. Will first final, instrumental to.
There's the only problem that Michael really had with the mask. It wasn't of him. If it was Bushy's mask, it wouldn't have been a problem.
It wasn't a great photo either.
What about the travel factor? Was there any interesting stories? We heard about, Carl apparently had to bring his Nintendo, and, Maney's infamous, weeks before games, that sort of thing. Any other interesting sort of travel stories that you recall from your time, particularly around this time?
I think the only problem we had with travel is that there wasn't enough stock in the bar. Because we'd empty that plane dry a couple of times.
I look forward to the travel. The travel was fun. We used to love the travel. Yeah, it was something to look forward to, not something to be scared of, was it? It was always really bonding. Yeah. And we really bloody fed off that, I reckon.
So it's a bit later probably than 92, but one of the good stories was David Hart and David Hines used to room together, and they'd always have a few beers the night before the game.
Just to settle them down. Yeah, nothing silly.
Nothing too silly. Only 3 each, and they stopped at 3, and they ordered their room service one night at where we were staying at the Hilton or whatever it is, and there's a knock on the door and room service. They opened the front door up. Mick Malthouse standing there with
six-pack
of beers.
And apparently, the wrong room. Next Maney next door.
Well, Jeff was at the door, and apparently David Hines has dived underneath one of the beds. He tried to get out of sight, and so Mick handed him over. He said, "David, there's your 6 beers. You'd want to get a kick tomorrow."
Good
and
night.
Took off. And the boys sat down. They said they put these 6 beers in front. They said, "Oh, they're here now. We might as well drink them."
An hour and a half later, do you think we're cheeky enough to get another 6?
Yeah. So, but there's many stories that that went on over there. It was good to get away, and it really became just a really close-knit team, didn't it?
A great part about the flights, though, is old Bill Sutherland be walking up and down with ice packs. So you've got people, you're sitting in your seat and you've got bourbon in one hand, your leg up with your hamstrings all iced up. There's ice packs going everywhere. A few drinks. It was like something out of Animal House at times.
Yeah, there are blokes with no shirts on, blokes with no pants on.
And you had to get your tracksuit back on because we went straight to the nightclub most of the time afterwards. So you had to have your trackie on and off you went with their trackies.
That was at the Hippie Club. Wasn't it?
The Racket Club?
The Racket Club. The Racket Club. Was it Bobby Dennis? We used to give Rumours a bit of a hammering. But a couple of the clubs, and we rolled up in those the ugliest looking.
The pizzas.
So we had those
pizza
real
tracksuits.
silky, bright blue.
Now, I can actually say I had nothing to do with that. That's all Ross Nicholas's choice. That was horrendous.
Those tracksuits.
Those tracksuits, and then the tie that followed it. Oh God, he had some awful taste, Ross.
So everything that was successful in the marketing department in the early 90s, Willow was responsible for. Anything that was complete shite, Roscoe. Is that right?
I left the marketing division towards the end of 1993, and that's just when
You set it up. You were happy with the
did
way you
all the
set it
work,
up.
got them up, made them all the money, and then Roscoe took over.
Let's talk about some footy. The Brownlow count's quite interesting because you have Glenn Jakovic equal ninth with 10 votes. That's the most of any West Coast player in 1992. You were runner-up the year before. Was that a bit of a surprise that we polled so badly?
It was a pretty even year. You know, we had so many players that, you know, played well and probably took votes off each other, and, you know, such an even spread of a team that...
You would expect, though, wouldn't you, for a premiership side to vote a lot better than that, wouldn't you? You know, we had some outstanding players, you know. So the top vote getter that year was 10 votes.
Yeah, and Jacko, has he brought this up around you boys before?
No, he wouldn't want to.
It's the only thing he doesn't brag about, actually. It's really weird. He brags about everything else.
It's only 10 votes. Then again, I think I got 6 for the whole career. Don't understand why.
I got eight.
Oh, Bluey told a good story about Jacko last night, didn't he? How they were in South Africa and they broke down and there was all these wild tigers and lions and everything around, and they were with Malthouse in the car. And they broke, you know, so the car wouldn't start, so they had to get out and turn it around and push it down the hill to try and jumpstart it. And they all went to jump out, and there was Michael Brennan and, you know, Guy McKenna and all these, you know, absolute stars. And Malthouse jumps out and then said, "Jack, you don't come out, you know, like, you're irreplaceable, son, you know, like, stay in the car, you know." So I probably showed you how much...
protecting Jacko with his high-powered rifle.
And Jack was still in the car. He was the only bloke that didn't get out, you know.
But how good was it after the Premiership in 92 when you actually got to feel the cup, you know, because you couldn't get a touch of it after the game for the whole next 8 hours because Jacko had it, but when you actually touched it, it was an awesome feeling, wasn't it? It would have been good to feel it on the MCG, you know, when we just finished playing, I reckon, but Jacko obviously just let him go.
Did he actually even play on anybody, Jacko?
Well,
I mean, for a centre half back, all he used to do between him and McKenna, the way they just did run around and get the ball all the time, they got the cheap kicks.
the best form of defence is attack, wasn't it, Wilbur? Bluey used to say, if you had the ball, you didn't need to worry about defending.
So how do you reckon you would have been if you were a monkey in that back line? You got David Hart that, you know, doesn't pick anyone up. Bluey doesn't pick anyone up. Jacko doesn't pick anyone up.
Bush is fighting everyone.
All the midfielders folding back to cover, weren't we?
But I know these lunatics aren't going to do anything.
Then again, Chrissy Main-Waring was the sixth backman. I mean, let's be honest, as a wingman, he spent a lot of time in that back.
He's always back there, wasn't he? Rue was forward,
always
he was
going back, yeah.
So the other good story that came out last night was Michael Brennan. You know, he was playing on the big thugs, you know, the big thug full forwards in Tony Lockett, and, you know, Jason Dunstall wasn't probably that aggressive, but there was some awesome full forwards. And he reckons every time we'd be at opposite ends of the ground warming up before every game, and every time he'd look around and Whoosh would be down there sledging the full forward, calling him all sorts of names before the game. And he's like, "Mate, it's hard enough playing on Plugger as it is, you know, without you stoking everyone up before the game, you know. Stoke your own bloke up."
Well, Brett, a question for you. The 92 semi-final you missed with a hamstring injury. Just take us through that build-up following missing that game, going into the grand final, what you had to go through to obviously get up, and how nervous were you going into it?
Yeah, well...
How many lawns did you have to do at mix shop? Like, how much work did you have to do at a mix place?
It
was an incredible week.
Yeah, he threw in the gutters this time.
No, that was a commitment. I was impressed, mate.
So 92 had been a shocking year for me personally. You know, I'd missed 11 or 12 games through hamstring injuries, and I missed the second semi where we played Geelong and won by, you know, 85 points or something like that. You know, just absolutely flogged them, and I was sitting home watching that, and so was Michael Brennan. I think he'd missed that game as well.
How many too?
And I thought Guy McKenna as well, but someone said last night that wasn't the case. But yeah, so I mean, and then we got down to training on the Monday, and we'd basically had 2 weeks for the grand final, and I'd missed the game with the hamstring injury and just kept doing hammies all year. And, you know, I was running around, you know, trying to sort of impress, and I'll always remember it because Michael Brennan came up to us and said, "Pull your bloody head in." I said, what do you mean? He said, mate, don't do anything this week. Just nice and slow.
Mixed lawns, normal stuff.
Yeah, do some lawn mowing, that sort of stuff.
Whatever he wants, just do it.
And then, he said, and then, get yourself, up for next week, And I reckon to this day, if he hadn't said that to us, I would have done my hammy that week because I was young and silly and, just wanted to impress because we'd absolutely flogged them. And, and then the week after, got the pace up and they gave us a pretty big fitness test on the Wednesday or Thursday. And so they had the bag and I was up there jumping against Jeppy and everybody else on the bag for about half an hour. And
I actually remember that fitness test. It wasn't that hard, Brett. It really wasn't that hard. I think you're talking yourself up. And there's a good reason I say that.
You weren't doing
Mick Malthouse had a fitness test to play in a grand final, and I think it was 1982. And Francis Burke was the coach. And it went that hard at Mick, he popped his shoulder out.
That was after about 40 minutes, wasn't it? That was
absolutely terrorised him and broke him down.
And was he testing his shoulder or?
He was testing everything.
Everything.
Right, everything. I don't think he wanted Bushy to play.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when Brett's talking about how hard his fitness test was, I was watching it. I'm not too sure if it wasn't the softest fitness test I've ever seen.
How fast could he run in a straight line?
The legend. Never turn one way.
Just go.
Oh, you see what happens? You just shouldn't talk yourself up.
Yeah, no. So the legend of that was at the Richmond one, of course. But apparently there was 10 or 12,000 people in the crowd that night watching Malthouse's fitness test, and there was bawling. Like a huge percentage of this crowd was bawling because he was such an integral part of the side, and he dislocated his shoulder, obviously on this fitness test 2 days out. So.
Similar to you.
Was that according to Mickey?
No, that's folklore. I don't know where that came from, but Mick might have started it.
No, that's when I was at Richmond, that story was spoken about regularly. But I'm not too sure because we were never going to make the finals at the time.
Yeah, so there was some hard decisions that needed to be made for myself and Michael Brennan to come back in.
And who was it that came out?
Well, Juve came out, but Juve had gone back, I think, and played for South Fremantle in the week prior and did a groin or hamstring, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
He got carried off on the stretcher. I think they had it on our little group chat.
I think the unlucky, outside of David's injury, David Hines played a pretty good game against Geelong. He was very unlucky, and Michael came in. One, he's our vice captain. There's a part of why Michael Brennan had to play. It wasn't just because he was a great player, but having your captain and vice captain, who are both tough men. Michael doesn't, when you look at the way he played, John Worsfold was always hard, always tough, but Michael Brennan, with those long, lanky arms.
Like Roger Merritt, wasn't he?
He was just a very, very important player, probably unsung in our lineup, and to have him on the ground was very, very important, and that was really tough for David Hines, really tough.
So, gentlemen, the letter from Adrian Barrich to the group that you had referenced a few times during the week, Kempy, what did it mean to the squad?
It was a massive, emotional, powerful thing, really, for the whole group to hear how much it meant to these guys that were not going to be a part of the team on the day, but obviously were a very important part of the club and the squad. And to hear it from, I think it was Barra and Phil Scott, that how much it meant to them. Not only did they want us to be successful, which is amazing, in itself. They're competitive people like all of us, but were backing us up 100%, and the confidence that gave us, that was something that, I'll always remember because it was such a moving speech. I felt so emotional after they'd said that and really sat down and thought about it and thought, how would I feel if I wasn't playing and part of this first team, to win the Premiership. And, those guys, all amazing people, and it was, really emotional for me. It was awesome.
It's well documented now, and it's recognised that it's squads that win premierships, and we're the fortunate 20 that were able to be there on the day. But it's everyone that had contributed, not just that year, but for years on end to enabled the team to get to that point. As Tommy said, it was very powerful, but also gave us a different sense of responsibility, because it's not just us playing for ourselves. We're playing for these guys, the other people within the club that have supported us. We're playing for our families that have supported us for our whole playing lives. We're playing more broadly for the fans that have supported us. So, but for that to come from those guys that we've worked hard with week in, week out for years on end, meant a lot to us, and it was a really important part of our preparation and the lead up and the performance.
I think what the letter really did, the message was not to let the opportunity slip.
Yeah.
And it reminded me terribly of 91, which we tried to all blank out, and I did.
And some of those guys were there and had experienced that.
And had been in there. But when you look at the message and the guys around the room at the time, there was Ryan Turnbull, Jason Ball, David Hart, David Hines. So you go through this, Mark Hepburn, you go through the list of players that didn't play, and they were top 20 in any side getting around.
Competitors, weren't they?
There was some great talent that didn't play in that 92 side. But the message was they were all there and all part of that. And I think what Adrian and Phil did was just, solidified our determination that we'd win that game of footy.
Let's talk about the grand final. It was a hot pace. The start was pretty ferocious, and you find yourselves behind by 17 points in the second term. Was there any panic? What was the feeling like? How did you have to get back into the game?
I didn't even realise that we were that far down. I mean, I always, when I look at it now, obviously the replay, but I don't think there was any panic. We had a really strong belief in the group. It was. I never thought they could get too far away that we couldn't get them back because of the players and the personnel we had. So, from my perspective, I wasn't panicked at all. I'm not sure everyone else felt, but I didn't think we were far off it.
Yeah,
3 goals down.
With how I was feeling on the day, I always felt that they were going to throw everything at us, and I felt like we controlled that and got that under control. But having watched the game the other night in its entirety, my Lord, they missed a lot of opportunities too. I mean, we did as well, but they had opportunities to go 3, 4, 5 goals up, and they were very kickable. But on the day, I didn't feel that, Tom. Even at half time, we were a couple of goals down, and we kicked a goal, I think, with 6 seconds to go. Before half time. So we would have gone in 3 goals down. You look at that in a low scoring game, that's a fair mountain to climb, isn't it? But on the day I didn't feel it either, and the feeling coming into the group at half time was really positive, wasn't it? Even though Maney was sort of banged up and Pikey had been knocked out.
There's no shouting or ranting or raving. It was a very focused time, I reckon, that half time.
We spoke about that last night, and it was interesting that Peter Sumich is the one that actually got up. It was pretty calculated when he says something. And he just basically said to the group, we've got this. So that's at half time, and he was super confident. I mean, not bad for a bloke that strike rate on kicking goals isn't too flash. So he was very confident. He always kick 111 goals one year and 76 points and 225 out in full.
A lot of goals.
Very confident man.
Yeah. You're moving to the midfield. How did it happen? Who spoke to you, and what was the message around what you had to do?
Masterstroke.
Well,
absolute
it's very clear now that turned
you spoke to Mick.
Game,
you spoke to Mick. You said, Mick, you've got to get me in there. You know how influential I'll be. And off you went, didn't you?
Well, yeah, it came from me. But so to this day, I don't know who did it. So Tim Jeps claimed it. You did it?
Well, I put my hand up.
Well, you were playing on Couchy, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
He was completely destroying you, Tills, wasn't he?
Well, he was. No, he was. Yeah, no, I was off the pace, and as the boys alluded to, there was a lot of all of us in different ways had different challenges, injury challenges, and whatnot to overcome leading up. But I think we had a great belief, and we also had great flexibility in the team. I think sometimes that gets overlooked. There was 10 of us that could play forward or play back and swing into the midfield, and we knew what was expected for those different roles. And I think that flexibility within the team was one of our key strengths. But I know it's well documented. But I'd played the whole year with a ruptured disc in my back. By the time I got and had limped to the end end point, and by the time it was grand final day, I was, basically I was at 50% rat power, and Mick and the club knew that and had been nursed through, and I had no muscle mass in my left leg, couldn't push off it, couldn't kick off it, couldn't do anything, but still there was the opportunity to start on Couchy in the middle, which I'd done a few times before, but it was pretty clear pretty quickly that I just couldn't, because every final, as we know, is a step up in terms of intensity, and I couldn't take that step because I was just physically spent. But obviously Mick, with his wisdom, knew that Jobby was right and ready to go and could step up and step in, and he'd gone into the midfield before. So it was pretty evident kind of halfway into the first quarter that I was off the pace, and there was other things happening that we had to adjust to, and Jobby's swing into the middle was a key pivotal move.
And you had a conversation about it.
No, I didn't say, no, it was just clear to them and it was clear to me. Yeah. So I kind of had no choice but to accept that, but knew that...
It was amazing that Jobby was able to go in the midfield, with the injuries and play that half that you did, three-quarter. It was amazing, really.
Yeah. So I don't know who did that. Move because Jeppy claims it, Robbie claims it, and so all four of them do. But to be fair, Turls, by the time I got onto Couchy, I think he was rooted too. I think he was tired. So you'd run him both ways, and
I didn't run too far. Or too fast.
I think you're being a bit harsh on yourself. I watched the replay the other day, and I reckon you ran him pretty hard. And I reckon by the time I got onto him, he was just starting to paddle a bit, and that really gave me the impetus to start going forward, start pushing forward hard, So I think you had run him a fair bit, and I think, to this day, I still reckon that he was starting to tire badly, But I love playing. I came to the club as a midfielder. I'd never played forward until I got to the West Coast Eagles. I'd been a midfielder my whole junior career, and suddenly you're playing forward all the time, and so every opportunity you got to try and get up into the midfield, I just loved it.
I think 90% of the side were midfielders when they came to the club.
Well, they were. McKenna was a midfielder. Worsfold was a midfielder. There was, wasn't there? When you think about that.
There's only one.
I think all of us were midfielders.
Except Bluey. Because Bluey got...
He thought he was a midfielder.
...oriented in there because there was too much happening all around. He wasn't quite sure which way to go. He's the only one.
Did you hear Robbie say that last night? They asked him, as a runner, what's the worst thing you ever did? And he said, one day I went out there and I told Bluey to go in the middle. And Bluey said, well, what do you mean? And so he put Bluey in the middle, and Bluey goes in for the centre bounce, and Robbie gets back to the bench, and Malthouse says, Robbie, what have you done? And Robbie said, what? He said, I said Louie, not Bluey. Bluey reckons he got in there, he says, no, where do I stand? What am I doing in here?
Yeah, that's the back half, those boys in the back half.
They're different.
They sent Woosha down to the forward line once, and after about 3/4 he'd had duck eggs.
And cleaned about four of us up, and we're just like, mate, get back down there.
Just go away.
Get away from us.
Go away, you imbecile. Go back to the other end, the dark side. Get back to the dark side.
In the second half, I have to ask you about that goal. So,
Cork in the ocean.
Were you going for it? What was talk us through it.
Yeah. Look, I was trying to do it the first time, and I think it was a guy. I think it was Simpson. Hit my ankle and tripped me up. I thought there was a free kick going, but I just thought I'd better keep going. So I'd had that. I was doing that from the start. If I'd missed, I would have been. I don't think I would have played another game. If I hadn't have kicked that goal, Michael would have said, "That's the end of you, son. That's it."
Thought of feeding it back.
I think there could have been 2 or 3 people I could have given off to, but I took the leaf.
You didn't see him. I
took a leaf out of Brett Heady's armour and said, "No,
that's not Brett Heady. That's Peter Sumich. That's steam out and straight over their head while there's blokes, flying past you."
So no, that was definitely a deliberate act, and I can say that hand on heart.
But going back to the centre circle, you had to think at that point, this is turning here, right?
When I see him, running around like that.
I think it might have the goal prior to that. I think it might have been Evo. Yeah, I think that Evo kicked that, and that I think that already we're on. From there on, the confidence level just went through the roof.
Well, that was just before the material set sails for home, wasn't it? Was that?
Which I was going to ask you about, because you both were involved in that one. So you gathered
I would have got it,
nicely
yeah.
off the ground.
I give it out. Okay.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've seen that goal replayed 750,000 times over. They always cut my kick out. Like the ball, they pan to where the ball's in the air, and I'm like, oh, just go back another second, will you? But it was a good hard ball get by Thomas out.
Heady, set for a goal.
I mean, just to be able to kick at full speed, from 55, 60 out the way he did a couple of times that day.
It was the best kick on the run.
That's so hard to do. You normally got to slow down, but he was flat chat, wasn't he, and booting them from 55.
But he's a freak, wasn't he? Like, his build and everything, he'd spent about 15 minutes his whole career in the weight room, and he's got the muscles, legs and the arms.
That was accumulation of.
I think that was someone showing him where the weight room was.
When he walked past it, the clock was on.
Weight room, but he had, his flex and his quickness of reaction, all that was just like that, and you can't be, it's just natural. And he had this natural ability, didn't he?
What was Malcolm Blight thinking about playing your best centreman?
Bairstow.
Your captain. You're the best centreman in the league at the time, in my humble opinion. And I'll go and play him on the fastest wingman in Australia. Malcolm Blight's done some strange things before, but that was just.
So did Riccardi ever to go to him the whole game or not, or was he on the other side?
I don't think so, and that would
have been a good matchup. That wouldn't it?
Perfect matchup.
Yeah, Roos said to us when he matched up on Bairstow, he
said, "I'm going to have a day out here."
What about the moment you knew you'd won? Was it a particular goal or a celebration or something that triggers the memory?
I reckon it was Willow's goal for me. And did you do the whole...
That was in the last quarter.
Yeah, I reckon it was about halfway through, because even then it was still quite tight. They came pretty hard at us at the start of the last quarter, but I think your goal, and then I think Summer might have kicked one.
Yeah, I think it was after Summers.
4 or 5 up, or maybe 4 up.
Yeah.
And I got a bit carried away. I thought that was over. I thought that was a sealer.
Oh, I jumped on your head. I remember that.
And then Chris Lewis came up to me and he said, "Stop celebrating. The game's not over." I said, "Mate, we're 4 up. There's 3 minutes to go. Is there any chance he's gone?"
It's funny you say that.
Watch on.
That's how.
Just check the watch.
That's how I felt. That's how
Lewis just used the sundial.
That's how I felt with it. I was too scared to even think about that. I knew that was their end goal, obviously, but I just thought we're still not there. I just didn't want to, get that into my mind that we were there, because we just weren't there.
Lewis made sure, in no uncertain terms, he wasn't happy.
I felt like it was the one after. I think that we all kind of had that sense that Willow's one was the one that kind of secured us, but I think the one after Summers,
when he did the whole,
that one, it was like when we could relax and start to enjoy it.
He wanted to run to the other wing. He said, I was all set to run all the way out to the wing. He said, then I got a cramp. He said,
and he started doing that stretch.
If I remember correctly, after I kicked that, I think it went back to the centre, and Ken Hinkley kicked a goal for Geelong.
Yeah.
So straight away, I might have gone out a bit too early, but then Peter finished that last goal off. But when Hinkley kicked that goal off, I looked at Louis and went, "You might be right."
What about the celebrations, the aftermath, and knowing what you'd achieved as a group?
I think for me, the greatest highlight, people talk about the pre-game, the game itself, after, that night back at the Southern Cross and all sorts of things. But the thing that's always stuck in my mind is when we landed at Perth Airport, the skipper was up in the cockpit. Thinking he told everybody he was flying the plane.
So going to bring her in, boys, bring her in hard.
And they took us into the hangar. The plane went into, we're still
that's right.
into the hangar. And you looked out the windows as and it was packed. It was all the support staff.
I thought we actually might have been driving to CB Oval the way we went in that hangar. I thought you were going to take us to the Oval.
Yeah. And then
straight up Great Eastern Highway.
Yeah. So we came down the staircase and there was a single door that basically went out to the bus, and you had no idea. But as we walked out, there was just lines of police. And I had all the police in the line, and the crowd was just amazing. So from the time that we got on the tarmac, the place was crowded to Subiaco Oval. The whole, the streets driving down Great Eastern Highway, you're looking out, and there was people everywhere. And I don't think it's ever going to be repeated. Not in the sense of the AFL. It was Olympic style stuff. It was.
Was the fire department there when we arrived with the hoses?
Yeah, they were blowing water.
The water and that? Yeah.
Out the top of the hose and stuff.
That's right. Yeah, on the tarmac.
I think that was a reality check on what we'd done. To see the line and the faces of people.
It meant so much to so many people.
We changed people's lives at that. That was for me, and it'll always stay in my memory. And our partners were with us, and I had my wife was with me, and I said, "This is." Whew.
Mick said it changed the AFL. It was the defining moment in the nationalisation of the game. Is that the way you guys said?
Until recently, not really. Yeah, but we were obviously the pioneers, weren't we, of taking the cup out of Victoria, and the hatred that they had for us in those early years was just incredible, wasn't it?
It's hard to do it. It's proven how hard it is to do. I mean, Fremantle haven't done it this yet, and we've been lucky enough to do it, 4 times, and it's. It's just bloody hard to do it.
From over here, I mean, it's a long trip, isn't it? I think Sydney and those sort of those 1 hour trips and 2 hour trips are a lot easier, aren't they? But it's not for me. It's not so much the trip over, but it's the trip back. When you're banged up and you're sitting in cattle class, and we couldn't move. And
did you sit in cattle class?
I was at the
front. But we did. We were pioneers, and we did revolutionise it. And it was only ever going to be the first time once. So we made it possible for other teams. And I think reflecting back, you guys, I'm not sure what you guys think, but we have a deep respect for teams like Adelaide, who are able to do it back to back. Obviously, the travel equation was completely different for them, and same with Brizzy when they got to their three-peat. But if it wasn't for us, it wasn't. People couldn't see that it was possible. And as the guys say, the travel. Mickey made that point last night, 1990, when we travelled 6 weeks in a row, and he thinks that's what set us up in terms of our resilience and
galvanised everyone.
We had a plane strike during that 6 weeks too, didn't we? So we had to go from Perth to Kalgoorlie, and then Kalgoorlie to Ayers Rock.
Kalgoorlie, I got to see a few of my mates. It was awesome, Jumped off the plane.
Well, that was the last of the 6 weeks. The refuellers.
Can you imagine someone travelling 6 weeks in a row now? Yeah, I mean, can you imagine one of the interstate sides going 6 weeks in a row on like what were we doing? We're coming back on a Sunday, and then we were going again by the Wednesday. And there was no training. It was,
and that's what Michael was saying is that we went out and had that massive travel in front of us, achieved greatness from that, but that changed the view from the AFL. And all credit to the administration at West Coast was that they then went into bat, and the AFL accepted that was an unfair disadvantage to a Perth-based site. So the rules started changing then, and of course then you start, home finals all started changing. And so it was a massive change that made the VFL the AFL. As much as they'd already changed the logo, they hadn't changed their...
I think we finished one year 5th, didn't we? And Essendon finished 8th. And we ended up playing a final at the MCG. I mean, can you imagine that happening now? It's just, that was stuff that happened quite regularly, and they'd always schedule 1 or 2 weeks away for us before the final started. So you'd start on, having those away trips. So, and I think that, getting back to your original thought, that has been a huge thing, I think, for this group. It's changed the way the AFL looks at things, and obviously we were the pioneers for that, weren't we? So we had to do some of those things for things to get a bit more even.
And the game's changed so much now because of things we had to do. Now, did you see the other day? They've sprayed something on Marvel Stadium
non-slip
to stop the dew.
Makes the ball sticky. Right? It didn't make any difference. They were slipping and sliding everywhere.
So now they spray so that the game, is lovely for us all to watch. They don't slip around. When we used to go to Moorabbin and they turn the sprinklers on.
Yeah, that's right.
What a change in 30 odd years. It's gone from turning the sprinklers on to make sure there's enough mud for St Kilda to win a game, to now that they coat the ground with a non-slip substance so they can look better.
And it's got a roof as well.
Yeah.
Has that stadium got a roof? It has.
Unbelievable.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on History Makers. Congratulations on an incredible achievement in 1992. You've got a lunch to get to, so enjoy that. And enjoy the rest of the weekend as well.
Good on you, Tyson.
Thank you, Tyson.